Hello, I'm Jacqueline Holstead, and you are listening to On Point Conversations. In this podcast series, we share creative marketing, content, and branding strategies that help your business successfully navigate the new normal marketing environment. Today, I want to talk about and address the question of why is a content strategy really necessary? Oftentimes I get asked this by clients when I start working with them, or if they don't ask me, it's something I know that they're thinking about and wondering why they have to spend time planning a strategy when they just want to move forward and have content created and placed in various locations, either online or printed or whatever the medium is that we're talking about, or mediums that we're talking about. First of all, I want to go back to defining what a content strategy is. If you go into your search engine and you put in content strategy, there are a lot of ways to look at it, but I'd like to tell you the way that I perceive a content strategy to be, because it's not only a strategy document, it's also a planning document. So it does your company and your business a lot of good to actually go through the exercise of developing it. A content strategy, in my mind, really focuses on the planning, keeping your business goals in mind. So if you're not the entrepreneur and you have a team or an executive team and you're not sure what the business goals is, you do need to know your business goals for the company and also your brand. And it's taking and planning how those business goals, brand, are going to work to be involved in creating the quality content to your specific audience. So you're planning really the creation, the messages around it, how you're going to deliver it, and where it's going to be delivered at. Because it's not only that it's the words, although those are very, very important part, of course, is the content and the messages. But it also includes the images and the multimedia that are used and the different ways that you're communicating your brand and benefits across different channels to your audience, potential customers and current customers. What it does with the plan is it really works to ensure that you're creating useful and usable content, as well structured, easily found, consistent, and I really like to say delights your customer. It's kind of like when they open a package at Christmas time, a birthday gift or, Christmas gift. Hopefully they're happy about it and they're happy to see your content and they're delighted because they're learning something, they're benefiting in some way, and they're seeing how they can make their lives easier. I often like to start with the pros and cons list when I'm making a decision. So if a client actually asks me this question outright, I'll go through this. But if not, I still have these pros and cons in mind. So I'm going to start with what are the cons of doing a content strategy that I hear or that I understand that someone might be thinking. First of all, the marketing landscape changes so much. If I have a plan in place, it's just going to be changed tomorrow anyway. Others would be no time. We have no time for this. We just need to get out there and do this quickly. We saw that in the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, where companies had not prepared themselves to really have an online presence. They might have had one, but a really effective online presence. And so they jumped into the developing Zoom meetings and doing things. And it was quite a jump before actually planning what they needed to do. And no resources. There's no one here to do it. We don't have anybody that can really do this, to do the plan. And we have no money. We don't want to spend any money on, a plan, because a plan might have a bad connotation of it takes forever. It takes tons of people and tons of time. But in my mind, there are many pros to doing a content strategy. It's really the foundation of your marketing program. You wouldn't hire an architect, or you wouldn't hire a construction worker to build your house without having a plan, a foundation plan. Whether you hire an architect or whether you buy a plan. You have a plan in place and you know what you're moving towards. That's what a content strategy plan does for you. It's looking at ways to create that quality branded content, posting it across applicable medias, putting it out there systematically and consistently, delivering that consistent message that provides your customers and potential customers with engaging material that starts to build trust among them because they need to be trusted. They want to trust your company. It's used to, of course, increase sales, which is ultimately we need sales and revenue in order to keep our companies going. And the ability to save money and time in the creation of marketing materials, because you don't want to have to have and reinvent your messages over and over and over again, because that takes time and it takes effort away from your actual program. If you have the foundation in place, I really guarantee you it'll go a lot more smoothly and a lot more effectively. And if you have more people in your team doing content, you know that they're working together then because they know what they're working towards. So let me just briefly today go through how you might build a content strategy. Some of it will differ a little bit, but some of it's very much the foundation of any marketing program. First is outline your objectives. So really, the first thing I like to do is I like to go in and review all the content or as much of the content as I can of a company that I'm working with. So basically, I'm auditing their content program in the beginning. I'm looking at what they've done. I'm evaluating it according to what the strength was, what the weakness was, what worked, what didn't work. And I answer questions to myself or to the company of is the graphic identity as well as the message consistent? Is the image you wanted to portray consistent? Does it communicate your unique selling proposition? Are people and customers delighted to read your content? Are they reading your content? Is it geared toward your target audience? And when you really have a clear picture of what you're doing, it's easier to evaluate what works and what doesn't work. So it's really defining to the beginning that overreaching content strategy objectives, including this. You really do need to know your business objectives also, by the way, to do this. That's another key part. And if you're a person who works in a company and you're working on a team and you're not necessarily on the executive team or you don't know what those business objectives are, this is a good time to find and discover what they're looking for. They're definitely looking for things like revenue and sales, but there are other business objectives that they're looking towards, or introductions of product or things that they might be doing differently in the future, or maybe some strategy they're taking on for a new market. Those types of things are really good to know in the beginning when you're developing your strategy. And then you're going to look at of course, media outlets. How are you going to measure which is a good media outlet, which is a working one, which isn't, and the specific objectives for that medium. The second principle is your basic marketing principle again, and it's define your audience. Oftentimes clients will say to me, I'm really all things to all people, and that just isn't going to be the case. I haven't found that anyway very often, if at all. So you want to know and have a really good idea of who your target audience is, what they want to hear, what they need to hear, what's beneficial to them. Always looking at where are they going to be helped, time, saving time, saving money, being more pleasurable types of things that they do. How do they benefit from either your product or service? It's a really good time too to focus on what types of positive results you're going to want, including sales and revenue, but also in other positive results. Like how are you going to measure those? And make sure that back to objectives are measurable. Be sure to look at what your competitors are doing if you have a competitive marketplace, where your competitors are, because there's competing time among your customers on who they're going to look at from a competitive standpoint. So look at where your competition is, and where your target audience gets their information about your category. Where are they going to look for that? In this same area of defining your audience, you could also look at how are you going to segment your audience. If there are different segments in your population, and how do those segments differ, and how might you be putting content differently to those different segments? There may be certain things some segment is more interested in than another segment. So this is a good time to consider where those opportunities are. Part of your strategy is also establishing your distribution strategy. Where have you been the most effective reaching your audience in the past? And where do you going to be adding to that to see what other types of medium you might be seeing as effective to reach your audience? There's also a combination of media channels, so it's not doing everything at one time, but kind of creating a ladder or a system of when something is, if it's posted on social media, when it's posted, where it's posted, the time frame is posted, and then laddering that a little bit so you're not inundating a customer or potential customer at one time, but you're giving them different ways to access that information. As I said before, really establishing measurements in this point is really good for objectives. It'll be good for if you have a management team that you have to go back and justify what you did, and looking at how are you going to measure that and what's important to them. Again, I know we always go back to, or I do anyway, there's a concern with sales and revenue is how that is working out. But there's also other goals that your management team or executive team should be aware of with regards to your brand, to your new markets, to what you're doing. Make them measurable. Also make them doable. We don't want to make them too big or too small. You want to start right where you are and then grow in increments from there in your measurement standpoint, because we want to lean towards success and not try to do failure in the very beginning by being too asking or trying to do too much. My favorite, consider contracting with a content marketing agency. Very few companies that I work with have the resources or expertise to create content in-house. So you may need to hire an outside agency. And actually, probably my clients are that way because they have looked for me. And so they have searched out content agencies. Be very specific with the agency, what you're looking for. Include the things that are important to you, what project criteria you are, who they're going to work with, your working budget. Be very clear up front. Choose wisely your consulting company, because they will make a big difference. It'll either be a real positive or it'll be negative. In another podcast, I will go through, because I've been in this business a long time, go through selecting an outside agency and some of the things you can do to help be successful with an outside agency. Now, create content. That's where my clients always want to go. How do we create content? And that's part of your strategy too, is what content and messages are you providing? Because you're back to objectives and that planning point. What messages do you have, and how are you segmenting your audience, and what audience message goes to what group? And then you're going to look at how do you create this content? What's the most effective way to create content for your audience? Is it most likely it's going to be visual and verb and words, because people differ in how they learn things and how they even want to take in information. There's different ways of doing it. Again, some people are very visual. I know I'm very visual, but some people like to read more. Some people like to, download a manual and read it and print it themselves. There's all kinds of different things you can look into. Social media, if you're looking at Facebook, there might be different groups that are really more applicable to you and that you might want to join and go from there. Be quiet in the beginning, kind of coming in, but you might be able to talk more about your company and benefits later on. The other thing is agree to your launch strategy, because now you're getting into when are you going to launch? What are you going to launch? Where are you going to launch? And as you're launching, you're watching the aspect of how are you meeting those objectives that you established in the beginning so that you can be tweaking your program. So a launch strategy, and you want to launch systematically, I think, so that you can keep track. You can launch everything at one time, but you want to systematically know how you're going to be observing it and how you're going to be evaluating it. And then part of that big process of the strategy, because we're kind of, again, talking about strategy. We haven't got quite to, we've talked about creating content and messages, but we're going to be writing and putting our photographs together and our images and visual after the strategy is complete. But we're going to want to look at debriefing and evaluating. So as you're going through the process of content creation and distribution and segmenting your audience and looking at, what are your consumers needing, or customers and, potential customers needing and benefiting from, you want to be regularly debriefing and regularly evaluating how the program is doing, because that keeps you on top of